right, it is 6 o'clock, and I'm going to go ahead and call the May 15th Environmental Advisory Board meeting to order. At this time, we do not have a quorum, so we will not be voting on anything tonight. So that means the approval of the April 2025 meeting minutes will be postponed until the next meeting. So the next agenda item would be announcements from Nora. Do you have any announcements for us?
No particular announcements, more
Okay.
just discussion for later.
Okay, great. There are no rezoning cases, and so the first new business agenda item is the Earth Fest survey results. So before we get to that, gratitude and acknowledgement time. So thank you to Water Resources for transporting our festival stuff to town campus again, and maybe for the last time. Thank you to planning for letting us borrow a table, which was absolutely critical to doing the festival. Thank you to Bruce, who also tabled with us for a little bit. Thank you to Mr. Jensen for bringing the super swag. He brought some silver maple treelings and some birdhouses, which were extremely popular. Thank you to Nora. You were indispensable to us. You helped with organizing, hauling our stuff, and all kinds of other things. And then thank you to the rest of the board members who were there and able to participate. And I think it was a really fantastic event. So with that, the EarthFest survey results. So we finally got a survey deployed. Would you like to discuss?
Yeah, so I made a cute little presentation, but I'll wait until next meeting to present
Okay.
to everybody. But the sheet under your agenda is just a quick synopsis of all of the results. So the day of the event, we had 19 people respond to the survey, which, that's fine. But then I asked Karen from Communications to put it in our All in Apex newsletter, and then we ended up actually having 82 results. So I'd say that's pretty successful, big turnout, thanks to the newsletter. We had the majority of the people that answered live here in Apex, so I feel like that's good. That gives us a sense of, what our citizens actually are interested in. 5 people from Cary, 4 people that selected other. We didn't have that many young people respond, which maybe next year we can try and get them more engaged. We had one respondent that was 13 to 17, one 18 to 25, 14 people that were 26 to 35, 34 people that were 36 to 54, and then 30 that were 55 up. So majority of the people were that 36 to 54 age range. Our main environmental concerns that people selected: loss of forest, tree canopy, that was number 1. That's not surprising to me. I feel like I hear about that the most, just in passing. Loss of biodiversity was 2nd. Pollution of rivers, lakes, and reservoirs was 3rd. Air pollution was next. Then minimizing heat islands, then solar, and then flooding, and then one person just wrote charm. So not exactly an environmental concern, but I'll include it anyways. So then this was a little bit of a broad question that we included was, what do you think are the most important functions for the town's environmental programs team? The first answer, number 1, was to facilitate the prioritization of conservation and restoration needs. So I feel like that's exactly what the board is doing. That's kind of the main descriptor of, the whole purpose of the EAB. Second was habitat restoration. 3rd was community conservation programs. To me, I was thinking of like Plant the Peak, or Ellison, and our volunteer coordinator does pollinator programs, so that type of work. 4th was communicate community-driven needs to decision makers. Again, I feel like that is, the EAB is one of our missions, so that aligns well. 5th was education and outreach. And then 6th was gather community feedback for conservation and restoration needs. And that was what this whole survey was. So kind of surprised that was last, but it's fine. And then our last 2 questions, those were things that I was interested to know. So I wrote, are you familiar with Apex's Sustainability Action Plan? that's something that our sustainability coordinator, Dawn Reeves, put together, and majority of the people did not know about it. So that lets me know that, hey, we need to do more outreach and let people know that we're actually doing this good sustainability work. And then same thing with our pollinator and tree canopy programs. Majority of the people said no, 49 said no, 31 said yes. So definitely want to focus on pushing those messages out that we've got these great programs. So
Okay,
I think it was a pretty helpful survey.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I wonder if maybe sort of pushing those, the pollinator and canopy programs, like that almost in and of itself could be a topic of the booth, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
Sure. rather
Yeah.
than a more educational type thing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I feel like it's just good to know, especially with the topics, like what people are concerned about, just to have in the back of our minds moving
Well,
forward.
it helps us to
Yeah.
know what to focus on, or
Yeah.
what we need to focus on.
Well, I almost wish there was a little bit more like insight as to further expand on each one a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's something maybe next year we could do, like in person on the day of. We had trouble getting people to scan the QR code and actually take the survey. Nobody wants to stand there in the heat and look at their phone. I mean, it's not a long survey. It wasn't that many questions, but maybe like diving further into these topics. Like we talked previously about doing those boards where people could like put a push pin or put a sticky note on, the area where you have concern, and we could do something like that, dive further into the boards like that, so that it's interactive and people actually want to do it.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
It would get them engaged immediately.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like a lot of people were like, yeah, I'll scan your QR code and take the survey, and then it just
And they
like
walk away.
fizzled. Yeah.
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 I feel like if this right here was done this weekend,
Mhm.
then number 7 flooding would go up to number 2. Probably.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
I didn't have any trouble at my house, and that's
That's-
a surprise.
All I've heard for the last 2 weeks.
Really?
My emails have yes.
Huh.
Not just Apex,
Yeah.
Raleigh, Durham, all over the place.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I think this is helpful too to know, in thinking about when we get our new seats added to the board. If one of those is going to be a tree canopy
Mm-hmm.
member, a previous member, well, then that would be great because we know that people obviously care about the loss of forest. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe that person will have some insight into different things we can do.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, great. And so you said next time there will be a little presentation. We can get
Yeah.
the other members back up to
Yeah.
speed. Okay,
It's the same
perfect.
information. But
Yeah, but I think it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This is good to think about. Okay.
Just a quick maybe thing for you guys to be aware of. I saw it on, I think it was Washington Post or one of the newspapers. It was showing a canopy loss map. We had one that Wake County did that measured between 2010 and 2020. This one looked at, I think it was maybe 18 to 2023, something like that, a little more recent. And in Apex, most of town had an increase in the tree canopy.
Mm.
It's just the far western places had a severe decrease.
Yeah.
And I thought it was kind of notable is that if you look at area-wise, maybe it's going down, but if you look at just block by block, it's actually going up a little bit. It wasn't like going up a lot in those places, but like downtown was going up,
Yeah.
mostly because it's not changing as much. And trees grow kind of naturally here when they're not cut down for grass or houses.
Yeah. I think it was Guilford County. They're planning, one of their GIS department, I think, did a very in-depth canopy analysis. And there, what they found is like what that reflected, that canopy in developed areas does go up until approximately your 25 to 30. Then as those trees mature and die out, then it starts declining because it's not a forest situation typically where you've got recruitment of
growth,
other
yeah.
species
Yeah.
in room to just let them grow. So it was really interesting. I'll have to see if I can find that and send it around. But it sort of gave a longer look at what was happening to
Well,
the canopy.
that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It really does.
Yeah, and like in that first 10 years, you get a really big green up,
Mm-hmm.
and then they age out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might be important information to know for that Plant the Peak program.
Mm-hmm.
If there are, I think we're doing native trees, but if there are certain trees that are even more important than just plain native trees, that might be helpful. The ones that will last longer in an urban area.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
Yeah.
And it may be like, if you're planting one in your backyard next to the woods back behind, maybe you can use a certain one versus if it's alone,
Mm-hmm.
then a different one. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But that person, if there was a tree cap person, that probably would be good to know, or if they have a background in that, would be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really, yeah, where you're at. And I think people are anti-growth, and so that's what they're going to say because they're anti-growth in
Yeah.
general.
That's
Um,
what I was gonna say. That's
Separating that out.
doesn't surprise me.
Oh,
That
I
first
see.
one is
Yeah,
up there
yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's the, and it's as bad to say as they possibly live in a new home, but they've been there the last 4 or 5 years sometimes.
Yeah.
That just comes up a lot too.
Or they live in an established neighborhood next to a new neighborhood being built.
Yeah.
So separating out the kind of anti-growth sentiment with the tree canopy sentiment, I think is hard
Yep.
for us. And another little tidbit, I saw the news today that just released the 2024 population numbers for municipalities. And I thought it was kind of notable that the growth rate population-wise in Apex, Fuquay, Holly Springs, Wake Forest was like within 1% of each other from that 2020 to 2024 period. We had the most growth because we're a little bigger than those, but it was like 18%
Wow.
in that 4-year period. And I'd kind of be interested to know in other places, like, is it the exact same things or is there nuance? Maybe there are environmental people in those towns, like, is it just anti-growth or is there a nuance, like they think the canopy's doing better in some places than others? I suspect it's the same complaints in all the places, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. I attended a City of Raleigh tree event, and it was all the same complaints.
Well, the city of Raleigh probably is canopy's going up or
Well, yeah, and that's
steady.
what they presented on, and people still,
They didn't believe it?
yeah,
Okay.
Hmm.
yeah.
It's what's happening in their backyard.
Yeah.
It's really all that matters.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I'll admit that even though I'm on the council here and I try to think about, and when I go around different places in town, I try to look around and kind of take it in. I do take the same routes, most days, to and from work or wherever, and it's like I'm only seeing, a small fraction of town and kind of influenced by that, admittedly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also too, people I think are seeing changes in just sort of the style of development, like like Shepherd's Vineyard. Those are they have big lots. There's plenty of room for trees, and then the newer developments are more.
Shepherd's Vineyard's 40
Yeah, it's 40-something.
40 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I grew up in Norwood
Okay.
by Apex High School. I mean, that was
Norwood's
it was the
even
first
older.
PUD. It was the
That's
first
even
PUD.
older, yeah.
It was the first PUD in Apex in 1968, I believe.
Yeah.
So
I think it was controversial at the time too.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen some news stories.
What was?
Shepherd's Vineyard was controversial
Why?
because it was growth. It was change.
Oh.
It was a big development at the time. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah.
There were a lot
Yeah.
of houses.
There's some I've seen some news story. I think with Apex 150th had some old news clippings like that where people were griping about Shepherd's Vineyard. I thought that was funny.
Wow.
I mean, it was Shepherd's Vineyard. Then Brookfield came in right behind that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were the two. Those were the three, and that was just all
Right there.
in that corridor,
Right.
right there by Apex High School.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you had Apex High School, Apex Middle School, A.B. Balcom.
Everything was right there.
The 4 schools were right there, and that's where growth really happened, as far as PUDs and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now, even though there might be a place that has 30% RCA, I guess maybe it's also an outreach thing that, yes, there is this big chunk that's set aside for preservation, but
It's in the back, right?
Yeah, it's in the back.
Where the extremes are.
Yeah,
Largely.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And so the perception is there's not as much, but in some places there, in fact, could be more than.
Well, if it was wooded before, it's less, right?
Mm.
We are doing better, I think, overall, and I've seen, I've kind of seen it. What's kind of cool I've noticed is like you go to Google Maps in the Street View, they have like a back in time thing for some places where it's gone by like 20 times in the last 20 years, and you can see like these new neighborhoods that look great now because all the trees are growing up look like mine look bad when it was.
That's the same thing on Google Earth. This you can change from year to year to year
Yeah.
to see the change in it.
And I had a neighborhood that wasn't mass graded. That was before they started doing that, but even then it looked cut down pretty good. That first trip of the Google truck, and then now it looks very leafy.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
And maybe we'll have a better discussion. I do think this committee working with planning. I think street trees are a way. And I know the planning, the people that do the power lines hate those things, so the roots get into them. But I do think this committee could have some influence if we could explore best practices and think about how it could work and how it could be both visual and environmentally a good thing to do. I think there is work to be done on that front, for what it's worth.
I love that. That would be amazing.
I think of the caliber tree that goes in the front yards, because some, you ride down Richardson Road and see the townhomes through Smith Farm, and some of these townhomes have been built for 5 years, and like caliber, that tree hasn't hardly grown at all.
The part between their house and the road.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I say, this is as far as that part is the thoroughfare planning's through there too, but.
And do you think that is as a result of the type of the tree or how it was planted?
Yeah, it's primarily the type of the tree.
Okay.
I know some municipalities require you to have a soil amendment done. I know Raleigh requires you to have if you have a street tree, then you have between the back curb and sidewalk, you actually have to, there's this, we call it magic dirt, but it's this soil you can only buy from one provider anywhere within probably 100 miles. And if you put it in say like one tree, you have to provide like I think it's 15 by 40 foot area. Now that encompasses, that's underneath the sidewalk, that's underneath the driveways. You also have to get compaction on this dirt to put your driveways in, to put your sidewalks in. But we've done it both ways. We've done it where we put it all in first because it only makes sense. But then when your dry utilities come in, they dig it up and they incorporate the clay and everything else to it. And then all of a sudden that dirt's useless now. It doesn't meet the intent of what they're trying to do. But then if you do it on the onesie-twosie basis, then the cost of that for the builder or developer who goes up double and triple because of now you're going to do this one area and this one area and this one area versus just taking the first 14 feet, cutting it out, and putting place in it. But
Yeah,
there's several different things we can look at.
that's the kind of discussion. Part of loss of canopy and growth is this committee is competing with like the need for more housing, affordable housing that either based on income or just more housing lets people move around and the smaller houses get moved into the bigger houses and that kind of thing. So, but things like this, which may incrementally increase this cost of the development, but it doesn't affect the housing like needs and that building part, might be a nice item to think about for the committee.
We do.
If you want to try to address like number one on the list here.
We do.
But the way they're planning is also 100%. I mean, if your B&B is this big and you dig a hole that's this big, you're not loosening up the soil that's around it to help it promote root growth at all. So but then who, you know,
Right.
that's 2 more staff members to run around and measure, make sure the holes are dug right before the plants go in, and
Yeah. And even like there's probably an overlap between like planning and like the transportation department and what their requirements are, and
I
you
can
know.
tell you for that 100%.
Yeah, it would need to be a collaborative thing. If that is a topic, I'm not saying this topic if you guys
Yeah.
want to address it, but I think that we're just limited on loss of canopy
Yeah.
options if we want to keep
Yeah.
building homes people can move into.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's really there's 2 options. There's the take it down and put it back, or there's just leave it to begin with. So you know, you've got your RCA, and maybe the buffers. You know, the buffers that are planted back. You know, if those could be not taken out and planted back, just kind of left. That would be another way, at least, to preserve some established trees with the soil that was there, with whatever biodiversity was associated with those little bits of land.
So the other thing too is how buffers are perceived, where one person or one department looks at it as, hey, we're looking at it as a true buffer, so we do not see the traffic or see the homes from the street or from the neighborhood. Another department's going like, well, no, we're looking at more along the lines of the vegetation that's there. A good example is you have a new community that's going in, and as soon as you leave the main road, it drops off into the community, where this one over here, it rides up. And so if you put a berm or do planting buffer along the high side, then it truly acts as a true buffer between the road and the community. Where on this side, it's dropping off, you won't see the top of that plant material for 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
So you're really not achieving a true buffer there for the purpose of what a buffer is. You're achieving a planted, vegetated area.
Yeah, this is a good point. I think is part of your guys' job is to think about these zoning conditions and think about what makes the neighborhoods unique and makes the developments unique. And I think you do a really great job. I think, especially you, Suzanne, on like the wildlife corridors and the water. But things like this, where if the current trees are just pine trees and the houses sit above the level, you know, maybe ripping everything out and putting magnolias or whatever kind of more substantial kind of trees that will grow much more vigorously and thickly is more important than if it's the other way where it's lower, or if it's got some hardwoods on the edge already. And you could probably get that from some of the street views even without the tree surveys potentially. That's something to think about when you're doing the case by case basis.
So I know there's been a couple of times that, you know, we call out hey, this buffer is required, but we ask for, you know, more of a buffer, or you know, a different type of buffer. But again, I go back to this is where it's really good to have some sort of preliminary site plan, at least a preliminary site plan to look at, versus just a open tract of land and there's no conceptual plan, there's no preliminary plan, there's nothing been done for it to give them, you know, the applicant suggestions of what to do. Kind of know where the main point of access is to the community. If it is dropping off, it is going up. You know, it's a lot to ask an applicant for if it's really not achieving what the board or the departments are trying to achieve.
But the aerial and the topo and the street view, if the Google thing's gone by it, you can drive by it, I guess, if you want, before we look at it. Those are available for all the ones. So for what it's worth, it's not as good as having a tree survey, obviously, or some kind of more
But this,
on the ground survey.
you can sometimes tell, like the state, their aerial photography is leaf off, so you can sometimes see the hardwoods,
Yeah.
like how big they are. It's amazing, and they have the color infrared.
I feel like they normally do it in the winter
Yeah.
for that reason, maybe.
Yeah, and to do the color infrared as well, so you can see what's evergreen, what's pine, what's deciduous. So you can get a pretty decent idea, but I do agree with Patrick. It is hard when it is just sort of a blank slate, and we got to figure this out. We
Yeah.
got to figure that out, and that might change. And,
Plus, you don't always know how far the road's going to go sometimes, or how far the sidewalk, and if they're going to do a sidewalk along the road, or if it's going to be because you're cutting down trees to build all that stuff, and like utilities, you're cutting down trees to build all that stuff in the ground.
It's gonna be a 5-foot sidewalk, it's gonna be a 10-foot multi-use path.
Right.
It's gonna be a 10-foot greenway, you know, all that, you know, because then your right of way or your easements increase even more to a cleared area, so
Yeah.
that gets back to, well, Parks and Rec wants to do, you know, now wants to put a 10-foot greenway path in as part of their, you know, connector, trail connector or whatever, so.
Yeah, maybe it's a question sometimes if it's on the plan as a greenway or a side path that's a little more substantial, to think about if it's possible to move that in a little bit and have, you know, the greenway and then the trees and then the road. I'm not sure that's
Do a
possible.
1-foot grass strip and then the 10-foot multi-use path or the side path versus a 5-foot grass strip, then the 10-foot multi-use path or side path.
Or 10-foot grass strip, but with trees in that
yeah.
sporadic, and then the greenway. I'm not sure that.
But then that grass strip, that's where your power, gas, phone, cable,
Yeah.
all that stuff runs through. So you can't. It's a fine line between what you put in. Some municipalities want you to put it between the back curb and the sidewalk. Some want it to be on the back of the sidewalk, by, you know, and that they get a certain distance from the front of the home. I was looking at a community today that we got, and there's, again, it was like a reforestation area we had to do, and of pines, and literally these things are 6 feet from the edge of the side of the home. You know, 15 years from now,
They'll be gone because the owner will come down.
that's right, because it's in a common open space area, but they'll be gone because the property owner is worried about their, you know, the limbs hitting the side of the home and everything else.
Well, so in our neighborhood, there was not space for them. But these ornamental cherries were put in spaces literally like this. And then after about 15 years, they started growing over the water meter boxes.
Yeah.
But they were beautiful in the spring. I mean, just the pink flowers. But eventually, it was like, okay, these are damaging equipment. They all had to come down.
Then you put them between the back curb and the sidewalk, and then the root base tears the sidewalk up and cracks the sidewalk, cracks the curb and gutter. It becomes a maintenance problem
Then it
for the
becomes-
municipality.
Yeah.
It's a space problem then, though, at that point. Like, there's just simply not enough space being planned into if trees are important, you got to plan for that.
And so that's set up too by your front yard.
Density issue.
That's not your density issue. It's set up by your front yard setback. If your front yard setback is set at 20 feet, that's what you're working with, which Apex is standard 20 feet, right? Yeah. So you got a 20-foot front yard setback. So in that, you have a 5-foot grass strip, 5-foot sidewalk, and then you have a 5-foot town Apex utility strip, which holds your water meter and clean out, if it's both are in the front. But then from there, you also, like I said, you have that plannable area, but you also have a lead walk coming from your driveway to your front
there's no
doorsteps.
space.
So, but again, so it keeps eating up. But again, like I said, if your front yard setback is, like I said, again, it's not density, it's the front setback is what limits you to your plannable area in the front.
That sort of almost argues to not even try, drop that down less,
But then,
and put it somewhere else.
But yeah, so that, like I said, you don't want to pull it any closer because then you're crowded up to the front. Then you don't get the aesthetics of what the town's looking for either.
Yeah. I've heard this kind of story before, and it's a challenge. I think the RCA that's contiguous and near the creeks is ecologically, as far as I understand, the way to go. But that's how you get this ranking like this, because they don't see it. They don't. Maybe they hear it in the night when the frogs are going crazy like they are right now. But from the road, it looks like just houses. So.
Yeah. Yeah, well, maybe that could also be an educational topic,
Where
or
now?
I don't believe the town has a map of all existing RCA planning.
There's-
That might be a question for you.
Because you could almost just, I mean, I would imagine if this board is saying, applicant, please try and consolidate your RCA with other existing RCA, the first question I would be asking is, well, where is that located? You know, do I have to pull up every plat to see if it's dedicated RCA?
That'd be good information to have if it is available somewhere to have for your guys to look at, and maybe not part of the application, but the supplemental that the staff can give you.
Yeah.
If there's a creek back there, it will be that way, presumably.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, if that's been recorded or not. Yeah, Bruce, if you find out, let us know.
At the moment, but I can always double check with RGIS and other departments.
Yeah.
If they have anything.
Because I will say, even like the, I forget what the map is called. There's one map that I don't know if it's the GIS department put up. A peek at Apex, I think is what it's called. It's really nice. It's got so many data layers on it that are helpful in environmental review. So I don't know if RCA is like publicly available information, but if it could be displayed on a map to interact with, that would be amazing.
It'd be a request
Yeah.
that you guys could make too.
Okay.
If you think it would help your job, and the council could say, you maybe bring it to council and say, hey, we need a little bit of staff time or some consultant, I guess, if you don't have staff time to help put this together so we could do our job better. Something to think about.
All right, thank you. All right. So let's real quick talk about, was there anything else EarthFest related?
If you weren't here, I told Suzanne that I emailed Alan to go ahead and order us a table, tent weights, and I think a poster holder with the remaining budget this year. So still waiting to hear back from him, but we desperately need those now that Stormwater is not storing our stuff. So
Yeah,
that request is in.
the weights, I think, are probably the most critical thing if we're going to keep using the canopy, because it was a little bit windy and yeah, it could have been a safety issue.
I should just bought some of those tent weights.
Oh yeah.
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 Those are like 10 pounds a piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's like 8 of them? 4 of them?
No, it's four to a order, yeah. It's like, well, I told the girls' soccer team, I said, hey, I'll for your tents, I said I'll have 4 ropes coming down. You can tie your soccer bags to them, and I'm not toting those 40 pounds of weights every soccer game. but those ropes in the corners, they'll stay tied to the corners.
Festivals on the pavement.
So, and then, will this board have a budget in next year's budget? Do you know?
There should be one. I don't know for sure.
Okay. All right. I would recommend,
On a repeat.
okay.
I think
Okay.
we did cut some stuff, but we cut our own budgets this year because of the uncertainty, but not environmental or other departments' budgets.
Okay. All right. Thank you. As soon as we know the number for sure, I would recommend that festival planning for next year commence. Just so we're not.
So we'll be ready.
So we'll be ready, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a scramble. And in case that there is a canceled meeting or two, that
Or a delayed order.
or a delayed order, exactly. Yes. And I will say, I would recommend also that there be some additional coordination, perhaps with Ellison, and then Plant the Peak. Is a Apex staff person doing Plant the Peak?
Yes, that's
Okay.
Philip Barnes,
Okay.
and he was actually out of town
Okay.
that weekend,
Oh,
so he
that's-
would have been there. but
Okay.
he was out of town.
So I think we should coordinate with Ellison and Philip.
Yep.
Tree cap, is that what he was?
I don't know if he was out.
Was Philip, who was the gentleman with tree cap? What's that from?
Philip. Mark
Philip.
Silbert
Mark,
was
maybe.
for a while,
Like,
and then
Philip's the one that came in and met with us 1 or 2 times, right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
It probably was Philip.
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah, I think he works in you.
Because he's with Apex Electric.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So I would recommend that we coordinate with them early on because Ellison had some really nice seeds to give away. Some purple cone flowers and some black-eyed Susan seeds.
And they had native stuff, didn't they?
Yes. And
Def-
all kinds of
definitely
other
native,
like
yeah.
fancy swag. Yeah.
I actually went with Ellison last week to Salem Middle School, and we helped them plant a pollinator garden.
All
Oh.
right.
Yeah,
That's
that was
great.
fun. Yep.
Okay.
We got to use her little cute seed packets. So,
Okay. Well, hopefully, tons of plants come
yep.
up.
So collaboration will be easy next year with her.
We got one at Friendship Station. It's about an acre.
Well,
You can come plant all you want to.
Wow.
You can just plant away.
You have an acre of property?
It's so right. It's probably close to 3/4 of an acre that's called out for a pollinator garden.
Wow.
In French, or actually it's Retreat at Friendship, not Friendship Station, but Retreat at
That's
Friendship.
really good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so, who's going to plant it out?
Well, it's on our approved CD, so it's me. not physically me, but it'll. Yes, we're working on putting. We're looking at putting a lot of our topsoil right now is in that space where not just hard red clays in there.
Is there a planting plan or?
Not necessarily. There's not a planting plan. It just says pollinator garden. There's nothing detailed about what it really is supposed to be.
Aha. Go out to Chatham Mills in Pittsburgh. They've got nice pollinator garden. You can get some ideas. That's cool. That's amazing. It should be a prairie almost with that amount of space.
Yeah.
It'll be nice.
Yeah. For
It's
sure.
all in one area. It's not.
It's all in one area, yeah.
That's nice.
You know, that's probably another thing to think about with this RCA, if we want an RCA map. Other kind of things like that on plans, probably be nice to know because if they're not, like, let's say a neighborhood has that and they don't know it and it's just grass or whatever, it might be nice to know because somebody might see it on the map and be like, oh, hey, that's like a yard, but that should be something better, and
Mhm.
that can empower them to talk to their HOA or town or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of help identify opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some volunteer people could come and clear it out and plant stuff, possibly.
Yes.
So on site plans, CD approvals, you have play loans and stuff like that.
Okay.
Not always do those play loans because they're set to be not exceed 2%, I believe is what they are, but a lot of times they're not always the best use for a play loan. So maybe does it become a pollinator garden area versus a play loan?
Okay, well, that's another question. I'm sorry, I'm dying a lot.
Oh no.
The question is, there are probably things on plans that, when they got approved, made sense, and now the neighborhood might desire something different. And I'm wondering if there's a process that kind of thing could happen, where they don't have to do a rezoning, which would be a pain in the butt and expensive and long, but like some kind of policy we could set that you guys could look into and
Mm-hmm.
kind of encourage too.
I think the play loans are dictated by the planning department, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
if
I'm
it,
wondering if the play lawn gets turned over to the HOA at some point, I assume, right?
Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's a town policy that the HOA could unilaterally change the site plan if by some vote, if it's from something to something else that is good for the environment.
yeah. So like.
This could be a bad idea, I'm not sure, but it could be a good idea too. Or
Sounds like a
easements-
great
Or
idea.
easements in the neighborhood too. Another example, in my neighborhood, we have an easement that I think is abandoned now, but we've been nervous to do anything besides put a little playground on it. But Yeah, easements too, that are in the ground.
Yeah.
And what they could do with those possibly as well, if anything.
Yeah, and usually in the covenants, like, is there something going into the covenants saying that they have to maintain this as a pollinator
Oh,
garden?
it's in the HOA docs and all that paperwork, yeah.
And
But
That has to
how
be
many
maintained
are-
by the
how many
management
are
company.
like that, I mean,
Any of your common open space areas, it'll be in the HOA docs and
well, I know, but the specifically setting out for a pollinator garden.
as far as maintaining it.
As far as designating a specific area. the
So for
covenant-
like what I have on the approved construction drawings, it says, it calls out pollinator garden on it. So it doesn't say play lawn.
Right, but I mean, how many different, PUDs have that?
It's probably only the new ones, right?
I would say it's, I guess Retreat at Friendship was approved, maybe 3 years ago.
I doubt any
Um,
neighborhoods older than 2015 have this kind of stuff in them.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they don't.
Yeah, I said it.
For RCA, maybe,
Yeah.
like open area, it might say open area, I'm not sure.
I mean, it's out of all the ones we've looked at here, you know, I haven't heard of like, we talk about a pollinator
Right.
garden area, but we don't have a site plan that we can see and say, hey, try to use that open space area or a play lawn area for maybe a pollinator garden, or throwing that,
They don't offer it.
but well, they don't know what they don't know what to offer because they don't have a site plan for it.
Yeah.
That's where like a town policy might be helpful, when, in the absence of a site plan, what can people do?
Like I said,
so
we can request
so the covenants would
percentage of
say the HOA has to maintain the common areas, but what does it say? It has to maintain this specific area as a pollinator garden?
I don't know. I cannot tell you how that language is written for that pollinator garden area.
Yeah, or like for play lawns, does it say you have to maintain this area in perpetuity as play lawn?
Yes. Now that is yes.
Okay, so you couldn't.
Like I said, I don't know how the language is for the pollinator garden because it's the first one that I've done.
Yeah,
Um,
but again, if nobody's like coming back around and enforcing that in 10 years, and they end up with a landscaper that does not recognize what that is, then that's probably going to turn into something else on its own, unfortunately.
we've had issues where you convert a stormwater pond and you put the aquatic material in, and then the maintenance people come in and they weed it all down because they think it's,
Right.
and then you have to replant it again, and
I mean, that's
we
only,
we run into that stuff all the time. So
it's
it's
only HOA really to tell the landscapers that they're hiring what they need to do.
Yeah.
And where
well,
they
it starts
need to
with
do
the
it.
developer telling the
Yeah,
HOA,
yeah.
and walking it with the management company for them to understand what
Yeah.
they're doing, but that doesn't always make it down to the ones
the theory
physically
is
doing the
good.
work.
Yeah, the theory is good.
Yeah, I've long thought that in terms of like these kind of issues, I think we're doing better than we used to do on the new developments. We're putting things in the written zoning documents that kind of force the issue. But there's probably a world of opportunity with older neighborhoods that don't have strict things, or they're out of date or whatever, and educating them on the options or how those could be changed if they can be. I'm not sure. A lot of times maybe not, but that's probably another venue that we can do a lot of good.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of HOAs have plenty of land that maybe it's a pool or something, and part of it a parking lot or mailbox. I'm not sure what the things are, but there's probably a lot that is being underutilized.
And this doesn't necessarily go back to just residential developments, but Pleasant Park. Could there have been a pollinator garden set up for that area? Possibly.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of space for pocket pollinator gardens. Even if you just walk this building on the outside, there's so much mulch where that could be pollinator plants. So yeah, I think there's
The other thing too is and I don't know any municipality that's got staff to follow this through, but I bring up Smith Farm all the time because I was initiated that whole process and went through everything, and then upper management changed their mind after everything was approved, and they took the pocket parks that you, if you will, that were initially designed and submitted that way to have these raised beds all throughout here, never came to fruition. But it was a great idea, and it came through.
You said Smith Farm?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I've driven by that, and I was like,
It came to.
It's going to be like an urban farm type
Yeah.
neighborhood. It doesn't look like it.
It all the things that myself and another employee at the time tried to put together, it all got smashed, which is unfortunate because we put a lot of time and effort into it.
Right.
I would say the majority of the people that bought the first 2 years bought into that as well, for it just to be decided upon to pull it. But then at that point, who enforces that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think all the facilities could be, this committee could think about related to that. I think Smith Farm maybe is, because it's private, it's going to be hard to deal with
Yeah.
unless we can educate the HOA. But the facilities the town owns, I think this committee could have some positive impact in that way, especially if you guys are willing to put in some work
Okay.
to like help plan it, and if there's expertise with you guys or other people on the committee that are going forward to think about working with the facility people to say, identify opportunities.
And I think there's actually quite a number of opportunities. I mean,
Yeah.
because you figure that, there's just like, this is sort of more like a parking lot-y thing, but you can install successful pollinator little gardens. But then there's places like the Apex Community Park. That's a lot of forest.
Mhm.
You
And
talking about more apartments, or you talking about townhomes? Because townhomes going to be the same way as like Smith Farm, where it's HOA maintained.
I'm talking about
Right.
town-owned facilities.
Oh, town owned.
Yeah.
Like I said, town
Oh,
owned.
sorry, town-owned.
Town
Yeah.
owned. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, 100%.
town of Apex, yeah. And even the nature park, the forest back there, I don't know if Parks and Rec has a management plan for the trees, the forest itself. So I think is there an invasive species sort of mitigation? There's a lot, I think, opportunity just that the town can do on properties that it owns and manages.
And actually, I don't know why I didn't remember this, but I am planning an invasive removal day at Apex Community Park.
Oh,
Yeah, so
do
it's
tell when.
June 7th. It's on Saturday. And actually, a high school group are the people that reached out to me about it.
Okay.
They have a long acronym. They're called SWANEC. It's Southern Wake Area Native Ecosystem Conservation Group. It's really long,
That's
but
impressive.
yeah, I don't know how I remembered that. I guess I've been emailing them so much. But yeah, they're high schoolers that started this group, and they have been all around Wake County, just removing invasives. I think they've done a lot of like English ivy. That's the main thing they see in the parks. So next Monday, I'm gonna meet with them to like scout a location out, but it'll be at the community park
Okay.
on Saturday.
JC Park.
No,
Which one
the
is it?
off Laura Duncan.
The
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
where the big lake is.
Yes, the big lake.
Yep.
Yep. So, and then something should be going out in the All in Apex newsletter about that.
Which used to be Apex's drinking water.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the town hasn't actually done, like the parks, they haven't actually done any like invasive species mapping on town properties?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or anything like that? Okay.
So yeah.
I mean, they did have a day a few years back where they went out to JC Park
Oh.
and worked with that.
I don't know.
I
if
don't
that
where were the
was.
kudzu?
Who needs some goats?
I played a place like kudzu when I played t-ball.
I don't think it's changed a whole lot.
That's
So Nora, could you also email that information out to the board?
Yeah.
Okay, and can anybody participate?
Yep.
Okay, is
Yep.
there like a waiver you have to sign in
Yeah,
advance?
there is
Okay.
going to be a waiver. We've got that written up. And I think we're going to do it through our like volunteer portal.
Okay,
So I'll send you guys the link to
great.
sign up. Yeah.
All right, that's all right. Excellent. Okay, y'all. So
New machetes like the last time. Did you remember that?
I don't think anybody. We just had our field safety meeting at work for the season, and there was a lot of caution about machetes and whether or not that's a good idea.
Hey, maintain a good, safe cutting circle.
Ye-
You'll be
yes,
okay.
that's exactly, yes, that was the main point. That's
It's
funny.
a lot bigger than with a pocket knife.
The other thing we had on our list was the zoning conditions list, but being that we don't have a quorum, we can't really vote to move this forward as our final. So, let's go ahead and leave it open for comment. And then at the next meeting, let's plan on voting on it. It's still pretty long. We didn't actually remove anything.
No.
So, I think,
Well, it's only 8 pages instead of 10.
exactly, yeah. So if you all have any suggestions, if you guys have any suggestions about what should be removed and what shouldn't be, I guess let's send them to Nora so we can discuss next time. Yeah, because there's a few on there that I feel like never get used, and it would be unlikely that they actually ever will.
Xeriscaping.
That wasn't the one that I was thinking of. I was actually thinking of preserving the pond. Like, nobody ever preserves the pond. They want to drain it and fill it in, and if the dam has integrity, I think.
Yeah.
That one I feel like doesn't get used. And then I don't even remember if it's still on here or it already got removed, about using the stormwater ponds for irrigation.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's still on there.
I think that's very unlikely
So that's why I was telling you, it's if a lot of your stormwater ponds they're not very deep,
yeah.
and if you're drawing from a pump that has any sediment in it at all, it'll stop the heads up,
Yeah.
and every one of the heads will be.
And wouldn't you also have to run like electricity? Like,
Yes, you have
wouldn't
to have
there
something.
be like
I'd
all
have something
kinds
to
of...
provide to the pond to make the pump run.
Yeah, yeah. And
Well,
it
it's
seems
only-
like a lot of places are doing dry ponds now too, and like other types of...
So I've only done 2 bioponds now, so that I had 3, if you will, dry ponds down in Garner, but you can't put a 4-bay system in a dry pond because then it doesn't become a dry pond anymore because it's holding water in the 4-bay.
Okay.
So we actually had to, in Garner, we had to get language rewritten for the town of Garner to say they're semi-dry ponds. Because the only way you can not hold water in the 4-bay is if you put some sort of orifice through the 4-bay into the main pond for it to surface flow to the orifice of the riser structure. So that took several months to get that language worked out.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And then dry ponds tend to, they actually look worse than aesthetically than wet ponds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. So if y'all have thoughts on this, let's give them to Nora and we'll discuss at the next meeting and then bring a final document to a vote there. Okay. Y'all have any other open discussion items? All right. Tomorrow is Endangered Species Day, so appreciate your at-risk species and promote the protection of them. All right. Guess we can't really move to adjourn since we can't vote on anything, so I guess we will call this meeting done.
Done.
Yep.
Thank you.